Hey listeners, feels like the middle of summer here in Vancouver, and I haven't been snowboarding in over a week. Off the top, I'll update you guys on the FNRad fundraiser, which I thought I was going to have in the summer. I think I'm going to push it until the fall to coincide with some movie premiere or something properly snowboarding. I still want to do a road trip where I interview people in person. I've got the 3 weeks from December 1st to the 23rd off, so that's when I'm going to do it. In the meantime, I'm purging some audio I've recorded and not used. Unedited conversations that were supposed to be full episodes, and they just fell by the wayside for one reason or another. This one is the Huffman Brothers, who are twins. I didn't know that going into it. I didn't put it out because I wasn't sure it caught the essence of who they were. So here's a bit of bonus tape to listen to and dream of winter.
This is Jesse.
Oh, hey, Jesse. This is Eric calling from the FNRad Snowboarding Podcast. How are you, man?
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing really good. Should I also call Lukas and then merge the calls, you think?
Yeah. I'll be totally honest, man. I am not feeling super radical today. I didn't know if you'd still be calling. I was going to email. Let me see. You should try Lukas, or I can try him and see if he wants to talk to you solo, but I'm just I have a pretty bad head cold, so it's just not going to be a very fun phone call.
Yeah, no problem, dude. I totally understand. Do you think talking with Lukas solo would make sense? I don't know what the dynamic is between the two of you in the snowcraft thing.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like a dynamic duo thing, but I'm happy having him tell you the story of it. You know what I mean?
Totally, dude.
Just because I'm a bit of a pile.
Yeah, no problem. Just for the tape, do you mind telling me, for 2 seconds, what the first board you rode was?
Oh, yeah. Dude, my first board was an Avalanche Damien Dagger.
Dope. And
I'm pretty sure it was I need to see the picture. I'm pretty sure it was a 150, a mid 150, and I was in 6th grade, so it was a mellow foot taller than me.
Yeah, that board was notoriously gnarly too.
There were no kids boards, as you know.
Yep, that's true. That's true. Okay, well, listen, thanks for that, and I'll call Lukas right now. That's perfect.
Yeah, man, and if it helps, I can chat with you maybe hopefully later next week.
Yeah, no problem, dude.
I love to blabber about snowboarding, but it's just not gonna be a fun take today. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem at all, dude. All
right, man. We'll carry on, and thanks for thinking of us.
Yeah, no problem. Get better quick, and I'll probably call you next week or the week after. We can email and figure it out.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Perfect. Thanks, man.
Perfect. Thanks, man.
All right, see ya.
Bye. Hello?
Yeah, hey, is that Lukas?
Yes, sir.
Hey, it's Eric from the FNRad Snowboarding Podcast. How are you, man?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing really good. I just got off the phone with Jesse. He's feeling sick today, so he's going to opt out.
Yeah.
But he's cool with you and I just doing kind of a solo thing, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, it's fine by me if that's all you need.
I mean, I'll call him later if it makes sense, but, he's pretty confident that you've got all the information about it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So why don't we start at the beginning of your snowboarding experience? What was your first board?
Oh, that was let's see, you're gonna make me do some math here. I was 9 years old and in 8th grade, and so I'm 38 now. What does that mean? What is that?
29 years ago.
29 years ago.
Oh God. That would
and then
make it 1987. Does that make sense?
Do you have a piece of paper?
Yeah. So would it have been quite a bit before your brother? Like, are you the older brother?
Well, we're twins.
Oh, yeah, okay. So there's technically an older brother, but...
Yeah. I mean, I'm technically older on our birth certificate.
Yeah.
But I was snowboarding a couple years before him.
Okay.
But I do distinctly remember whatever year that was, because there was Sims had their line. It was like the Edge, or like the jackknife, and they had a mini version of it, which was
pocket
135.
Knife. Yeah, the pocket knife.
Yes.
That would have been 88. You're right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So, and there was a store called the B-Side, which was in Burlington, and it was owned by the Coughlin brothers.
I've been there. Yeah, because I grew up.
I grew
up in Ontario. So when we were 16, our first road trip was down through Vermont. We went to Killington in the summer or like spring, and hiked up to some snow. Went to Boston.
Oh yeah.
Went through the B-Side. And where was the B-Side?
Yeah.
Was it in Boston?
No, it was right in Burlington.
Oh, it was in Burlington. That's right.
Yeah. So it was right in Burlington, and that's funny. There's, I lived in Whistler, and there's a bunch of Ontario guys that have a similar. Like, I'm from Vermont.
Yeah.
And do you ever know like Craig Ballantyne?
Of course. Yeah, I know Craig.
Okay,
Ballantyne
yeah.
very well.
All right, yeah. So he told me he had the same Vermont Association story. He's like, oh, dude, we used to drive down there from Ontario, hike Killington.
Totally.
And him and like Trini, Daryl Trinidad.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Those guys are all like in my era of Whistler guys.
Dope. Yeah, so you lived in Whistler for a few years?
Well, I was there every winter for like 10 years.
Oh, damn. Awesome.
So anyways, it was, there's that, the mini blade there was at the B-Side. I was graduated. And I distinctly remember waking up and it, being in my bedroom. Which was,
were you a skateboarder at that time?
Oh yeah. I had already been skateboarding for like a couple of years, and it was, BMX culture was pretty big.
Yep.
BMX and surfing wasn't really on the radar for any like young bad kid in Vermont.
Right. It was pretty accessible though, actually. If you went down to like Newport, Rhode Island, or Cape Cod or something, it wasn't. I guess that's still quite a ways away. Hey? 12 hours.
Yeah, I mean it's quite a ways away from like a kid who's 8, and then you have to like convince your parents to like drive you 3 hours to like go. So, but convincing them to drive 3 hours to the ocean would be tough.
It's not gonna
for an 8-year-old.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So, career-wise, were you ahead of Jesse? Like, did you kind of get there before him, or what was the trajectory there? Did you guys start competing in New England contests and then kind of come up together? Or?
Yeah. Well, there was I was doing competitions before he was. I snowboarded for a couple years, but he still was ski racing, and I had ski raced, and so I was snowboarding, and then he started snowboarding, and somehow he got into this like at Stowe they had kind of like a racing program led by Bud Keane, who is now like Shaun White's coach.
Nice. Yeah.
And I remember like Jeremy Jones, like Big Mountain Jeremy Jones. He's from Stowe. He was in that too, and they would all kind of like race around. And but I was riding at Sugarbush with at the time there it was like Seth Neary was there, and Ali Goulet was like a little guy.
Nice.
And we had our own little crew, and we were kind of more freestyling around, and we would, like hit all the side jumps and shred as many logs as we could find.
Yeah.
And then on the weekends I would go and do these contests. And Jesse was like doing this like racing program. So he wasn't doing like that New England Cup series.
Right.
How
are your parents managing this? Like I've got 2 kids, and if they were doing a similar sport and we're asking like, I want to go over here, and no, but I want to do something different over here. I'd be like, work it out between the 2 of you. We're going one place.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. You'd have to ask them that question. I guess now that I think about it, yeah, that sounds like a lot of stuff going on.
It does.
There. Yeah. We had, for the contest, we had like a little kind of local team that was put together by the shop.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had this like shitty old van, and a bunch of us would like jump in the van and go to these contests.
Cool.
And they're called Clearwater Sports.
Dope.
And it's also, in hindsight too, I kind of like, wow, our parents let us do a lot of independent stuff that I'd probably be uncomfortable letting or even if they knew what we were doing.
yeah, totally.
Because I was like, at the time that I was doing that, I was in the 12 and under division.
Okay, yeah.
And there was only 3 of us in the division. There was Ross Powers,
yep,
and a kid named Zach Diamond.
Nice.
And then myself. So the rest of it was, hanging out with like all these older kids.
Totally. I remember. Did you ever do the Can-Ams? There was a contest that was in Talisman, and then Kissing Bridge. Is that a place down your way?
Kissing Bridge. That's not in Vermont.
No, it would have been in New York, I think. So maybe that's kind of too far to get to. I just remember going to those contests as like 14, 15-year-old kid, and then you go to the party after, and somehow you'd be in a bar with live music going on, and all these snowboarders just being wahoos.
Yeah, so funny. Yeah. We got totally in all sorts of weird situations that you don't know how inappropriate that it is to hold yourself.
It's true, right? Yeah, I have kids, and I wouldn't. I don't know. I'd bring them, and I'm sure they'd be fine. We weren't bad kids. We saw people doing dumb stuff, and we're like, oh, we'll never do that. And then 5 years later, that's all we were doing. So at what point is there a sponsorship beyond like a shop level?
We first were, and we were like riding at the same level, which was a pretty, well, for one, if you're only like 12-year-olds riding, so you're already going to get quite a bit of attention.
Yeah.
And we were pretty good for 12, and we were like just obsessed with snowboarding. So and it's all we thought about. It's all we did. So we got fairly good. And there was a rep at Sugarbush, Dan Sullivan, who was a Original Sin Snowboards rep.
Nice.
And because Original Sin was done by Dina Star Skis, and they were based like right outside Burlington. And so he gave us this one board to share, and that was, like the first thing. So we'd kind of like share this board for a little while, and then rode for them, all through high school, and like quote unquote, riding for them as like getting some product and
we did all go on this one like photo shoot to Colorado when I was a sophomore in high school. And then when I graduated high school in '96, they were able to like give us a travel budget.
Awesome.
So yeah, so I remember, so we had like, and we moved out to Jackson Hole.
Oh wow.
And so like moved to Jackson Hole and had a like, and I mean I can't remember the actual figures, you know, but it was probably like $500 or something as a travel budget. So, you know, we like lived all winter, and that was we filmed for Kingpin Chronicles. They had their movie The Revival.
Yep.
And Original Sin sponsored that, and so like Ali and Jesse and I were in that. And then after that, that movie was pretty good, and we had like some good shots in it. And I think it was just like more, you know, an increased travel budget, you know, for the year after that, which was then the winter of like '97, '98.
Yep.
And the winter after that, I moved out to Whistler.
Good time to move there. That was an insanely good snow year.
Yeah, right. Were you out there?
Yeah, well, I live in Vancouver, so I've been here since '93, and just that is a legendary snow year.
Yeah, you know, yeah, isn't that right? Because it's funny is that as time goes on, it becomes more legendary.
Yeah, totally.
Because you can always. I remember we moved out there, and yeah, we just like stayed with a guy named Jeff Corbett, who's he was a snowboard photographer, and just some, you know, guys from Quebec actually that had lived in Jay Peak like in the early '90s.
Nice.
And they were like, "Wow, it's never snowed this much," and blah blah blah. And you're like, "Okay, well, bring it on." You know, we're from Vermont, and but then as the years go on, everyone talks about that winter, and it becomes more legendary the less it snows.
Yeah, totally. It was such a crazy year. They dug out the lifts at Baker, and they dug out the lifts at our local mountains here in Vancouver. Like the lifts were operating in a tunnel, like a hallway. It was awesome.
Yeah, well, I remember we went to Baker that year too, and just holy fuck, it was crazy. Yeah, there's tons of snow and terrain. You know, you're from the East Coast, so you remember like the first time you go out there, and you don't, especially at that era of snowboarding too. You know, the level of progression was like literally changing every year. So you'd like see people do, you know, pillow stacks that you didn't think were possible, and then they do it, and you're like, well, fuck, I guess we can all do that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, Baker was a really good spot to, like, for us, we were all enthusiasts, but none of us were, you know, sponsored riders per se. You'd see Jamie Lynn there, or Sean Farmer, or Craig Kelly, and you'd be like, holy fucking shit, this is the real deal, right? You're riding in a magazine right now. And the trend, and to see people do stuff like that in person is pretty wild. It is, because I grew up watching videos thinking, you know, say the standard films, for example, they could do without the big mountain stuff. Like, it's boring to watch. It's like, okay, anyone can make power turns. If I was there, I would do that. It sort of felt like that. And then when you get to Baker, you're like, oh my God, no. Still now, seeing some of the stuff that people did, you know, Tex comes to mind, just like such a powerful rider that makes it look way easier than anyone else. And you're like, oh my God, the things that those guys were doing at that time, with no precedent. That's a different thing, right? Like you said, like you see someone do a pillow line, and you're like, oh, I guess that's doable. So now everyone can do it. But the first guy to do it, you're like, he's gonna die.
You need to be like standing on the pillow line at first and be like, I don't think I can do this. And then you like watch someone do it, and you're like, whoa, that is possible.
It's incredible.
You know,
totally.
I certainly, I didn't have an understanding of how crazy like all the 8K stuff is,
right,
until actually went to AK, and that was still, years after being in Whistler, but then, the scale of things in AK is completely unimaginable until you're there.
Yeah, I haven't
right.
been,
So
yeah.
Oh fuck. Well, you should go just so you can then go back and watch text and be even more shitting your pants.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So then, it was like that. I think that winter of like 97 or so, when it was like an increase in travel budget, and I'd gotten hooked up with Sessions too, the clothing brand.
Through Joel, or through Joel Gomez, or?
Dude, I'm trying to remember how I got connected with them in the first place.
Sansalone or someone? Because Sansalone was a poster boy for them back then.
I wish I could remember who made like the first introduction. It might have been that, the original Sin rep at the time was like Repping Sessions.
Yep.
And got us connected with just some free gear. But then, shortly after, there was, Joel was there, but then, it was Keith Wilson was like he was the team, they had a little team manager and stuff.
Yeah, they had a great team.
And, that was epic. I took my first trip to Japan with them.
Nice.
and it was like a while ago there, like 98 or 99.
Yeah.
And it was like Jamie Lynn and Mike Ranquet and Yoni Makinen.
Wow.
And it was completely surreal. Yeah, totally crazy. Because people were just losing their minds for Jamie Lynn. We're at like a hotel, and in the morning you go down and there'd be all these like Japanese riders, just freaking out for Jamie Lynn. And that was and Mike Ranquet at that time kind of took me under his wing,
right.
Which was really cool. And so him and I ended up on the Northwave and Drake team together. So we actually ended up going to Japan a couple times together.
Dope.
That was he let me, like, when we'd fly out of Seattle, and he'd invite me to come down, I'd stay at his house, like a couple of days beforehand. And then when we come back in, we'd go ride Baker. And he was a really great travel buddy.
Cool. Yeah, when I got to meet him, we were actually riding at Mount Baker before we talked. And
yeah,
I don't know if he was turning it on just because he can, or to show off a little bit. He took me down some stuff I'd never been down there, and got my heart going. And I was blown away by how smoothly he rides, and how insanely good he is, and how nice he is as a person. He's just like, he's like available. When we were talking about stuff, he's really, humble and fun to talk to, because he remembers that stuff, and he was there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he was there when you think of him on GNS getting a pro model, before Craig.
Yeah.
Holy shit, dude! Like, he's the first guy I ever saw do stuff switch like that. Exactly what you're talking about with the pillow lines. Like, oh my God, we could ride these boards backwards. Totally. We could do all this shit backwards. It like opened my mind to like, oh fuck, this is gonna be big. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He's a super good person. A super good human being, and it is pretty interesting how much he remembers from certain episodes.
Totally. Actually, I was interviewing him at one point. He'd said something really profound, and I was like, that's incredible. Yeah, he said that probably the rivalry between Burt Lamar and Craig Kelly drove, the progression for a full season, because Lamar won the World Championship, and then Craig kind of said it like he's going to win it the next year because a snowboarder has to win it, not some wacky skateboarder. And I was like, that's amazing that you know that. And he goes, I think I might have just made that up right now. Like, it's just, like he's a wealth of knowledge for sure. And that was the thing. He's a true snowboarder. Like, he just loves it so much that it's in his blood.
But he was, his support, I know, it gave me a lot of confidence just to kind of feel comfortable doing it, you know, and being like just on kind of all of like the culture that comes around actually like professional snowboarding and this and that, you know, because there's a whole like work aspect to it that is pretty crazy, you know, if you grow up, you know, idolizing Mike, for example, or Jamie Lynn.
Sure.
But he just his like approach to it kind of taught me a lot about just how to be yourself, you know, when there's a lot of attention and kind of pressure around.
Oh, totally. Yeah, and he learned from the best, or learned with the best, right? Because he lived with Craig when Craig was switching from Sims to Burton, and Craig has probably definitely has the reputation for having the best work ethic from that whole group of people. Probably one of the best work ethics in snowboarding. You need to have it now. Yeah. Whereas back then, you didn't even really need to have it. There were other guys like Sean Palmer who, by his own account, he's like, I was partying and taking drugs and fucking hanging out, man. It was just fun. Yeah. Craig was training. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think Craig, too, interestingly, you know, he saw it, like, the business aspect of it, you know, because his whole, like, switch from Sims to Burton, right, like, that kind of highlighted, you know, him seeing, like, the value in what he's doing and taking steps to create ownership of that value.
Totally.
And, I know during that time, it's funny, because during that era, which, you know, Mike was from more so than my generation. I think my generation, we just weren't as punk rock as they were, you know, we were like, the snowboarding was like kind of just becoming a little more like accepted. And, I just don't think we didn't have as many like social barriers to kind of to have to like break through or just ignore than those guys did.
Right.
And I think those social barriers definitely acted as like a filter, right, to who ended up snowboarding.
I think you're right. Yeah.
So you get everyone, you know, you get Farmer and you get Mike, and then who else did I meet from that area? Well, the Hatchets were around. I ended up meeting like the Hatchets, you know, but then you do have a guy like Craig who can handle being like an outcast, but also is like, well, I'm also going to just be professional about the way I do this.
Totally. Yeah, we didn't have that as a generation. I started about the same time as you, and it's funny because for years and years and years, and we could talk about this when we talk about snowcraft, I really, like, Terry Kidwell was a name that I kind of knew, and Tom and Jake were basically the beginning in my mind, and I didn't really care to look back at that. We were always looking forward, and we weren't struggling. We felt like we were struggling because, like, you get on the chairlift and people would be like, oh, snowboarder. You know? So, but we're on a chairlift. We're not, like, on the side country somewhere hiking because they won't let us on. I mean, from the first year that I rode, I got to ride on chairlifts. And then, and I think also you said the punk rock thing. I think punk rock was slowly becoming, you know, like No Doubt, or, you know, there wasn't, you know what I mean? Like punk rock was a thing that was so
Pennywise.
Yeah. Pennywise was coming in, and snowboarding kind of grew up with punk rock kind of becoming this mainstream, more like they could change it to like California rock or something like that. And snowboarding was punk rock when it was just those few pioneers, and then it became California rock. You know, like there's all these guys like you guys and us from flat Ontario and New England who are just embracing this, like, yeah, we're snowboarders. And then you move out somewhere where, the people grew up with mountains. And I found people out here to be kind of lazy. Like, we were like, if it snowed, we were so excited and so pumped up. Like, East Coast guys, as we call ourselves, even though we're from the middle of the country, you could you could see it more. We were more hungry about the snowboarding thing. Yeah, and I think that.
Yeah, well, I guess it is a funny thing maybe about the East Coast is that there wasn't also like as big a mountain and ski culture. Mm-hmm. There was like skiing, as in vacationing.
Yep.
And I think probably, like our parents and our parents' generation were like, yeah, we would go skiing, and it was, a big time recreational thing.
Sure.
But that out west, I think there was like the ski bum, and so there was kind of like the ski culture.
Yep.
That also kind of allowed like snowboard bum and snowboard culture to develop more organically.
Kind of happened right away too, hey? Like right away in Whistler, there were a lot of snowboard bums.
Yeah, yeah.
Living in a closet or living in the bush. Like there were some people that just lived in the bush.
Yeah. My buddy, John Cartwright and I, we lived in this literally in a shack down by the river.
That's
one
incredible.
winter.
I sold John Cartwright his first snowboard.
Oh yeah?
Yeah,
nice.
He came up to me one time and let me know that I was working at the boardroom in Vancouver, and he came in and he bought, what did he buy? It was like a ride or a liquid little kid board, and he took it home and he bounced on his bed, hadn't even ridden it yet. He was so excited, and he broke it. And he brought it back, and I took it back right away, and I said, you know what, this piece of garbage. And we got him a GNU skidder, and he started on a GNU skidder and came up on that. And he's worked with tons of my friends at West Beach, and another buddy lives in his parents' basement right now. Actually, he's just an incredibly talented snowboarder and a really nice person.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he and I. The first year that I moved out there, he happened to be buddies with the guys whose couch I was crashing on, and him and I just like connected immediately. And then every winter, from 96 through 2006, every single winter that's where I was based out of Whistler. So I'd like rent a place in Whistler, and I'd move up there, and I would travel from Vancouver and blah blah blah. And John Cartwright and I would rent a place together literally every single winter,
Awesome. That's amazing.
And so he was just like my decades-old roommate, and is now by far, like my best friend that I have held over from the snowboard world.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah. So, I love him.
Yeah, he's incredible. So let's talk a bit about it's called Snowcraft, right? The edits that you guys do. And where did that come from? How did you guys decide you were going to do that?
The first season we did like 3 seasons.
Okay.
And the first season we did was we did a profile on our buddy Jesse Loomis, who makes those powder jet snowboards in Vermont.
Yep.
And then we went to Japan and we did profiles on the Genchem stick. Do you know those snowboards?
I certainly do. Yeah.
Yeah. And then TJ brand. You know TJ brand?
TJ brand. I'm not up to speed with. I probably would be familiar.
Fuck.
With
yeah, you should know. Yeah, you should know them. So they're these 2 Japanese brands that were making powder boards, and this was, the winter of like 2011, 2012. And honestly, this was like before funky shapes and powder boards were, like of much attention.
Totally.
And so the thing is, our Jesse Loomis, he's an old snowboard friend of ours from Vermont.
Yeah.
And I had already been in New York here. I was living in New York, and my brother was in Vermont and had been riding his snowboards. And sure enough, they were, they're really epic in the powder. And it was mainly, my brother's conception, because he had been up there riding them. And then I remember I went up there for a Christmas break, and I rode on it too. And it was just, for one, it rides really cool. And then there was a cool story behind it, which is like, well, why does it ride really cool in the woods in Vermont? Because Jesse Loomis has like designed it for this like specific location, right?
Cool.
And so that kind of like sparked a, oh shit, like there's a cool story behind this snowboard. And I know that we were like interested in making a snowboard movie, but not interested in making just a action porn snowboard movie, but something with like a little bit of a story to it.
Yep.
And so it was just like a no-brainer, to be like, fuck, we should do something about snowboarding on the East Coast, using Jesse Loomis's the powder jet snowboard, and we had gotten into I've gotten into surfing after a little while, and it's kind of like a surfing ethos, where the shapes are handcrafted, and a lot of the shapers will craft boards that are for, whatever their local break is.
Yeah, totally.
And this is at like not a mass production, if you're like making a lot of surfboards, then that's not going to work for you. But this is kind of more from like a, if you're making these like small bash surfboards.
Yeah, I remember.
And so,
sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, when we went to Hawaii back in the day, we stayed with this North Shore lifeguard, Michael Botello, and every one of his boards had a little signature under the glass, like hand-shaped for Mike Botello by, and it didn't matter what brand it was, like the Hawaiian Island Creations, he would get a shaper from them to, so it was this cool story that we knew. We were like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Imagine that in snowboarding. It doesn't exist.
So cool.
But it would be so cool if it did, and it sounds like Powder Jet was basically doing that. Very close.
Dude, yeah. Well, he was doing that, and then, we kind of turned over a few research rocks and found, I had never heard of Gentem Stick, but they had been around for a couple years, and were making those like winter stick inspired swallowtails.
Yep.
And then you kind of, we learned a little bit, this is before going there and actually, like interviewing them and riding with the guys. Mm-hmm. And they were doing the same exact thing, which was they're on the North Island of Japan, where the terrain is like not super steep, and it's got all those kind of like iconic windlaps that you see in Japan.
Yeah.
Kind of more of like a Mount Hood style, where there's all these like, it's kind of flat and there's deep snow.
Low angle, deep snow.
And there's all these, and there's all these kind of like gullies.
Cool.
And so the boards they made, they were inspired by the winter stick design, but they were then, further designed just to work for these guys as like home mountain. So there's like a lot of float. There's like the noses are huge, right?
Right.
So like there's tons of float, and you can stay atop of deep snow, even though it's not very steep. And then we kind of lucked into these guys, TJ brand, which you should check out. These guys are so cool. And their home mountain is, so they're on the South Island of Japan, and their home mountain is this mountain called Mount Tenjindera, which, as a cool side note, is legend to be Craig Kelly's favorite mountain in the whole world.
Rad.
And it's like a 2-hour train ride north of Tokyo, and you get there, and it's fucking bonkers, dude. Like, if you go back and if you watch like the first snowcraft,
yep.
It's essentially like Mount Baker on steroids. So you have all this like super steep terrain, and there's all these trees, like actually growing out of the super steep terrain. Right. And so you need to be able to turn like really quick, you know, and just be like back and forth.
Yep.
And so they also had these little like fish boards, you know, kind of like surf-inspired fish boards, but they were narrower. And the way the shapes were a little more like elongated down towards the tail. So you can go from heel to toe, you know, like just super quick. And then the type of board, like if you have it on a groomer, it's just turning by itself, you know?
Yeah.
But when you put it in powder, you know, it works like a kind of like it'd be like a lighter thruster surfboard, you know, that's like a lot more skatey.
Yeah.
And so we kind of like uncovered these rocks, and we're like, holy shit, you know, there's like, it's not just Jesse Loomis in his backyard in Vermont. There's a couple of other guys doing this. So we set out just to kind of, I mean, it's not like the most propulsive narrative, you know, but it's like, let's check in with these three shapers who are in different corners of the world, but kind of have like this same ideology.
Yep.
And it was an approach to, like, it's pretty amazing, you know, now, because now, like, Burton, dude, even actually, you know, like, Burton's got like a swallowtail.
Totally.
And in 2012, everyone just had like rockered freestyle boards.
Yeah, 2012 was the start of those Escape Bananas. That was just everything.
Yeah.
Escape Banana, right?
Right. Yep. So I don't know. We just kind of like, well, I mean, like you, I mean, I feel like, you know, my brother and I pretty much know everything that's happening in snowboarding, and we were like, wow, this is like a really unique thing that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And bonus, we get to snowboard all this deep pow in Japan.
Yeah.
So, you know, so we like scrounged up. Dave Short came with us. You know him?
I do know Dave Short.
Fucking, he is an extra good guy and super ripper.
Yes.
So he came with us. Mark Carter came with us. Mads Janssen came with us, and then we like rode all their boards and rode with the Gen 10 stick guys, which was really cool, and just kind of like seeing their like approach. It's like we kind of like we're doing a very simplified exploration of snowboarding. You know, no one caught like a whole lot of air.
Sure.
Mads did a bunch of cool backflips.
Nice.
But to see these guys' like approach to the mountain on their boards, you know, is different than. And then we rode with all the PJ brand guys out of Tokyo.
Yep.
And they had a different approach as well, which was really cool just to be around. And then we filmed a whole bunch of stuff. We lucked out; it was a really good winter in Vermont.
Yep.
So that was kind of like
who was bankrolling it? Like, did you guys kind of come up with the idea and then bankroll it yourselves, or did you use your professional snowboarding skills to sign some companies on and get them to?
No, it was. I mean, this is like bankrolling is an overstatement. You know, this was like a penny pursing.
Yeah.
But Trans World. They put in like a little bit of money to get us over there, and then the North Face put in a little bit of money to get us over there.
Brad.
Yeah, but I mean, like the amount of work, you know, that I put in editing and just in production is unprofitable.
Did you have a background in that, or was that something that you were learning on the fly while you were doing it?
No, you know, I mean, in 2007, I retired from professional snowboarding and moved to New York City and went to film school. I went to Columbia University.
Dope.
And so that's what I do, you know, and so that's what I had been doing was just filmmaking.
Right.
And so this project has been nice because it like combines two huge passions for me.
It's close to your heart. That's dope. And that comes through in the films. Like it comes through that it's from a perspective of someone who is in love with the sport, as opposed to like an outsider who's just making a documentary of like, you know, here these guys are doing weird snowboarding. It's like, no, this is someone exploring something in the core of snowboarding that you wouldn't necessarily notice if you didn't have the passion for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've definitely have the passion for it. Right. I know that something too that we were kind of inspired by is going the other way. Is that, you know, we had like the filmmaking tools to make like real story moments happen using a snowboard driven story. And that doesn't happen too often. I mean, that doesn't happen at all in snowboard movies because it's just showing this action. And then it's kind of now becoming a little, you know, it's happening. People are going for it a little more, but I know that Jesse and I is just like using that medium to tell stories. Is, you know, that's one thing that I'm kind of proud of with the series is that I feel like we can make you connect with these characters and give a shit and then kind of take you on a little bit of like a entertainment arc. Absolutely. That, you know, it's punctuated by these like snowboard sequences, but you know, you're with behind every great thing in snowboarding, there's like a dramatic moment.
Totally.
And so being able to kind of like tease those out, that's been,
I think
really fun.
I think the first one that I saw, I probably saw one of the Japan edits and didn't register what was going on, you know, like, cause when you, with media now, social media, just stuff pops up in your feed and you're like, oh, that looks like something I'm interested in. You kind of watch it, right?
Yeah.
And then I didn't start my podcast until, well, really, I didn't put out episodes until last year. I was recording the year before.
Yeah.
But my podcast wasn't supposed to be like historical. It didn't have any historical value in its conception. But I found as soon as I started interviewing people like Chuck Barfoot, I was getting these backstories. You know, Chuck mentioned Dimitri probably the same week that I saw the Dimitri episode that you guys did. And I was like, holy shit, I got to get that guy on the phone. And then I called his work. I called him over and over again and finally, and left a bunch of messages. And finally one day he just picked up the phone at his work.
Oh, yeah?
And he was like, yeah, I've heard your messages. And I recorded it actually. And asked him a bunch of questions about it. And he said, well, here's the thing. I don't talk about it at all. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And then he talked about it a little bit, which I was like, yes, this is amazing. And you could hear in his voice.
What did he
say? He said that it would probably be better if I focused my show on what was going on now as opposed to what had happened back when it was a bunch of old farts fiddling around. That he didn't know that there was a market for historical, you know, a look back at snowboarding. And he was like, just call some of the manufacturers and find out what makes them tick. And then
but I mean, he didn't like shed any light on his personal experience.
He did say that there was a moment that came to mind. He was like, you can ask people, why don't you ask people, you know, how deep is too deep? He's like, I remember being at an award ceremony or something with Regis Roland.
Yeah.
And someone said, well, how deep is too deep? And we both looked at each other and we're like, it's never too deep, ever. And they both had like a connecting moment. And then through that conversation and Steve Graham telling me to call Regis, I found out Regis' story. Have you guys done one on Regis yet?
No, but he is on our list of, he's the next, we're actually pitching the next episode right now. Yeah. And it's all about him and Apocalypse Snow.
Absolutely. I had seen that movie and kind of wrote it off as like, okay, it predates snowboarding that I'm interested in. And now going back and watching it, knowing the story behind it, I'm like, fuck you. I cannot believe this guy invented snowboarding on his own.
Yeah.
In a pocket of the world where it was so steep, and he got heli boarding every day for a year and $1 million budget from basically gangsters. I don't know if you can get him to talk about the people that owned Les Arcs.
Yeah.
But you should, and definitely that would be like, it's funny because your series inspired me to call Dimitri, which got me involved in this whole thing. And it's a rabbit hole that once you get a glimpse into this history that you didn't know, like I didn't know any of it. You're like, oh my God, the stories here are so rich and so engaging. It's incredible.
Yeah. Well, that time too, and everything was in its inception. I think, like I said, it just kind of like filtered out all the pussies and weak-spined people, and then you end up with these, really inspiring characters, essentially.
Iconic people, yeah. It's sad that I really honestly did feel, moved by the Dimitri episode, that here's this guy who put his heart and soul into it because he loved it. He was one of the first guys to actually have that love, and then he got pushed out of it. However, he got pushed out of it. But even Jake Burton in his Pat Bridges recent interview mentions and makes it clear that he had a good back and forth with Dimitri, even though he had a shitty time with Tom, and then they reconciled somewhat. He partnered up with Dimitri really early, and he admired what Dimitri was doing for sure.
Yeah.
Dimitri,
so interesting.
Dimitri was 10 years ahead of them. Probably.
Yeah.
Probably 20. It seems like he was current. He had current if those boards didn't fall apart and weren't so valuable, you could still ride them right now and enjoy them.
Yeah.
Totally. The designs are good.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, it's pretty much the same board as the Gentem stick.
Yep.
And then I've seen a couple other. Now it seems like in the last 3 years there's been like swallowtails just popping up all over the place, and and there's a handful that are they look like they're taken right from that shape.
Yeah, a lot of the people that I talked to, which were around back in those early days. It's fun to hear the stories of like Sean Palmer's first board. He traced a shape, probably an old Burton Woody, onto some plywood and just made one. Right? Like that's just the way it was. Yeah. And I mean, I see that in skimboarding still now. Some dad will come into the shop and be like, "Can I just trace this onto some cardboard? Because I can't. I'm not paying $120 for a thing that I can make."
Yeah. Well, it's funny enough. Actually, my very first thing that I stood on, this was before the mini blade, was a old wooden board that my dad and I made, and it was like essentially a skateboard construction. We had like glued a couple pieces of plywood together.
Cool. And
then cut a shape that was like that kind of backwood woody shape. Yeah. And I just remember we like steamed. We had it like over this big pot of steaming water and kind of like steamed a nose curve to it. Yeah, and then just varnished it and then put cross-country ski bindings on it, and it was completely impossible to ride. Because, you try and do a hillside turn, you just fall right on your back of your head, and then you do a toe side turn, and then your heels would come up and you fall on your face.
That sounds like an awful lot of work to go through.
Yeah, it looked so sick, though, and it was tantalizing because you're like, ooh, I'm so close to this happening.
Did you keep that board? Do you still have it?
Well, there was at Stowe, there was like this cider mill, Cold Hollow cider mill, and every fall they would have a scarecrow contest. Yeah. And so I made this was, I guess I was like 7. I made a scarecrow that had all my snowboard gear. It was a snowboarder scarecrow, and I had my jacket and my hat and goggles, and it was on the snowboard. And then all my shit got stolen. Oh. Dude, I don't know. I mean, someone was just going to kill themselves on the board that they stole.
Yeah. Instant karma. They try and ride it and they just die.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's incredible. That's amazing. So you've done 3 seasons, did you say? Or did you say more?
Yeah, 3 seasons. Yeah, the middle one was, the second one after that, we got, like a little bit of heat because then like some people saw it and they're like, wow, this is really cool. And then the second one we did, that was when we did spring break.
Yeah.
And then we did Tom Sims.
Nice.
You know, at that point it was pretty cool because we kind of had like a little bit of like a formula going, you know?
Yeah.
And it was, you know, essentially like that season was called Pioneers.
Yeah.
You know, so it was like Tom Sims' story and Tom, you know, is founder of Freestyle, and then and just beginning of like the West, you know, and it was kind of like the West Coast original rule breaker.
Yeah, and such a colorful character, and had the best team probably ever assembled, ever.
Yeah. Well, that was what was really fun. You know, was like his kind of like recognition of how media, you know, like how media could kind of like promote like the feeling of the sport, you know. And so it's like you'd see Sean Palmer just like cranking like a big Palmer, you know, big method, and with just sick photography. And that was a fun episode because that was the stuff that I grew up directly just like ingesting daily.
Totally.
But then there was spring break, and so spring break, you know, and that was a couple years ago, like before those guys were making real snowboards as well. They just had like these like fucking crazy ass plywood snowboards.
I've seen that episode. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's neat is like just their approach to snowboarding, which is more of a style over function kind of thing, but it's like very expressive, is like the modern day equivalent of like the whole like Sims in its heyday, you know, which is just these like busted dudes just, you know, getting radical in any way that seems, you know, honest to them.
Totally.
So we did that. And then we were at Mount Baker too for the bank slalom, which was nice because that was kind of like, you know, Tom's is a bit of an icon there.
Sure. I saw that one too.
And
so I haven't seen every single one, but I've seen most of them, I think.
All right. Yeah. Well, and then the one after that, we did Pete and Mike Olson, you know,
I've seen that
from
one.
Mervyn.
Yeah, I'm interviewing them.
Yes, we did
soon,
them.
Actually.
Oh, they're awesome.
They're the best.
Those guys are.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you better watch out. They're going to talk a lot.
Oh my God, Pete Olson! Like, I think I've had an 8-hour conversation with the guy before.
yeah, he just goes and goes.
And he knows everything. It's so crazy. Like, Keith, I interviewed Keith Wallace, Duck Boy, and he mentioned a little known guy named Hal Burton who did glacier snowboards back in, it would have been like 85 or whatever. Nobody would know who this guy was. No one. And I mentioned that to Mike to kind of entice him, like tell him like, hey, look, I'm not just some kook. I know the name Hal Burton, and his eyes just lit up. He's like, Hal Burton, oh my God, I haven't thought of that guy since 86.
Yeah.
And he had an hour story on Hal Burton and how he was a Cub Scout leader, and he took out an ad on the back of like the Cub Scout magazine and just said snowboards, you know, and he just made up a price or whatever. He had none, and he took a bunch of orders, and then he was just fishing around for someone who could make, you know, 6 snowboards for his Cub Scout kids.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And so the fact that, like, Mike and Pete, and their story too, right? Like, just buddies from high school. And it's endearing.
Yeah.
Amazing
well,
people.
they have, you say endearing or enduring?
Endearing and enduring. Actually, I said endearing because you just feel like they're so genuine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they're passionate about it, that's for sure. But, I mean, they are enduring, you know. They've failed miserably.
Totally.
and just kind of rebuilt from the ashes.
I actually was there when the first Jamie Lynn's, that first year Jamie Lynn's, fell apart, and the whole company was starting to fall apart because the glue that they used was wrong. And I worked for the Canadian distributor, and I was at a meeting where the distributor was like, okay, well, what's going on with these boards? And Mike goes, fuck, it's this glue we got from these guys in Utah. Fucking really sucks, whatever boards we made with those are just breaking. And then Murray goes, okay, what boards did you make with those? Like, do you have, is this under control? And Mike goes, oh man, I mean, it could be some, it could be all. I'm not sure. Like, it might be all of them. Actually, we're just like replacing them when hopefully this new glue will really work better. And I remember just being like, what? It could be all of the boards of the whole year?
Yeah.
Oh, shit. That's
probably was.
Good.
My good riding buddy back then, he had like the first Matt Cummings.
Yep.
And it was like the weird top sheet. It was like that kind of like khaki, like that textured top sheet that was from that year.
The doily or whatever you want to call it, flower top.
Yeah, his board just like blew up on his nose. He was really bummed.
Yeah, they all did. I remember the first time I saw that was at the B-side, actually. They had the first year of Ammo Appeal, and they had those raised up platforms too. And you're like, what do these raised up platforms do? And they're like, well, we don't know. And then they ended up just breaking along that line. It created like a spot where they all broke. But well, there you go. Yeah, I mean, so those guys are prime snowcraft fodder. Totally.
Because the whole thing with the series is that there's like a board kind of like design moment that is like kind of at like the rooting force. And those guys are at so many, I mean, we actually had to like, they've done so much board design stuff that, we just kind of like kept to their inception story, which is like metal edges.
Yeah. Yeah. When
you
look at them, like Mike Olson and Pete, kind of hanging around, was the guy who had a 8-meter string in his garage and invented side cut. Like, didn't just invent side cut for snowboards, invented side cut for skis. Like, skis had a 15-meter side cut before he was in his garage on his knees, created that 8-meter side cut and reinvented snow sports like indefinitely. Yeah. Changed everything for everyone. Yeah. That one dude.
Yeah.
And then there's magnet traction, and then there's the banana stuff.
And they were the first people, to do banana tech. So
it's insane, right? Like that one guy and his like mastermind. I guess Pete too. I hate to discount Pete, but it seems like, sorry.
Well, Pete's right there too.
Yeah.
It's just that like Mike talks a lot, but they both have like a lot of like engineering input into what's going on, and it's just like their collective knowledge of snow sports that I think is at play. And like they've been living this and obsessing about it for how many? 40 years or something.
Totally. Since high school.
And so Pete's definitely a part of it. He just doesn't he's not as much of a loudmouth as
right.
as Mike is.
Did they tell you the story about the half the company thing? They were on a road trip and Pete was being kind of quiet and Mike was just blabbing away. And he looks over at Pete and he's like, "What's wrong?" You could see on his face there's something wrong. And then Pete goes, "Well, we have this company and you own all of it and I own none of it. Like, it's in your name." And Mike pulled over the car and grabbed a piece of paper in the car and wrote down, one half of the company to Pete, sorry. And then he gave it to him, and it's a legally binding document, and then just got back in the car and they kept driving. Like, he didn't give a shit. Like, it did not care whatsoever. He was like, oh, that's just an oversight. Like, whatever. You want your name on the company. It's half yours.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't hear that one, but.
Yeah, there's no time for every single story from 40 years, obviously.
Yeah. Well, yeah, good luck with them.
Yeah,
but,
thanks.
Eric, I'm gonna have to bounce in about 15 here.
Okay, so let's wrap it up with where is Snowcraft going? And you've obviously seen the momentum of this, kind of looking back at the industry, that I think we can both agree when stuff was changing, right? Like when step-in bindings first came in, or when twin shapes first came in a little before that. Like, there was a lot of hype about what the next big thing was, and we've mentioned it again with the banana tech or with the reverse camber. The industry tends to glom on to these, like, this is going to be the next thing, and then it's quivers, and now it's quiver killers, right? Like, so it's like, and now it's these shapes. Like, I think we both kind of lucked out in that. I mean, I don't know about you, but I didn't see it going retro. I just started where I knew I could get people to talk, which was the pioneers of the sport and guys who have a good story to tell. If I would have called up, the prominent pros of the day, I don't know that people would have been as willing to talk about it. I might not even have the kind of stories that would be interesting, right? So, like this, you're kind of capitalizing on it, not in a greedy kind of way, but just in a like, all right, this is working, we're going to keep doing it. What's the plan from here for you guys?
Well, that's a good question. The plan is we do have, like, I don't want to talk too much actually about like the episodes that we're like pitching.
Right. No, I can keep the Regis thing out of there.
That's our top secret.
Yeah.
Top secret creative sauce,
Yeah.
But the plan, I mean, we do need to like pitch it. I mean, there's like, like full disclosures, like we need to raise money to like do this stuff.
Right.
And in snowboard media world, the budgets are so slim. And so that's like, an interesting thing that we're up against, because we do a lot of film work that is just in the normal world. We work with like Vice a lot. And so there's like competing, like forces there. But I know that the cool thing is that there's like what you're, like coming into here is that there's all these like great personalities and like really rich stories. And there are still, like product stories out there. And I think more than anything, like what we will do is, like we start with the product, but I think where we really like to take it and where we really enjoy, like making sure that it comes out is more like I was talking about before, just like these counterculture characters. And, in the moments when like snowboarders really are on the fringes. And I think, and now more than ever, I think that's kind of just important for, for you to be doing and for me to be doing, is to just kind of remember that it wasn't always, like the most watched sport in the Olympics.
Right.
And that from that, is where, and it's a personal taste, it could be too that we're just like old dudes that, like to remember the rebel rousing days.
Sure.
But I mean, that's what's up. Like all of the stuff, the stories that we're pitching, all end up with pretty big personalities doing sketchy stuff, to keep snowboarding going.
Yeah, that's rad. I like that a lot. Yeah, that's cool.
So,
and just so you know, I actually, and I'm positive, without you even saying it, that there probably would be in the works, in the pitch, a Craig Kelly story. That's going to be my big closer for this year, I'm doing an episode, and I can give you some contacts for some pretty original characters that you'd want to talk to.
Wow. Okay.
Ken Wiley.
Yeah.
Ken Wiley was the tail guide at the tragedy at La Traviata, and I did an interview with him.
Sure.
And she spent 10 years after, figuring out what went wrong, and he wrote a book about it and figured it all out. And then there's the judge in the Craig Kelly Tom versus Jake lawsuit. I got in touch with him. I have his contact information. He loved to talk about it. He was awesome. He's this guy from Seattle who's awesome. And then obviously you can find everybody else, like Kelly Jones, Savina, and all those rank witnesses.
Wow, okay.
That story is just it's again the same thing. It's like a richness with, like, when you just keep uncovering layers of holy shit.
Yeah.
This guy's insane.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool. Well,
So-
dude, you should if you should get my brother on the phone.
Yep.
Because he's got a whole different, things.
Yeah, well, that would be good to do. I feel like we got a lot of good tape here, and it's gonna be, it'll be a lot of editing, but
Good luck with that.
Yeah, that's the crazy tedious part, huh? But I think, I'll probably get him in there too, just to have the back and forth story between the two of you makes the most sense, right?
That would be, that'd be cool. And he grew up a lot more counterculture than I did, even.
Mm-hmm.
So, he was a lot more of a punk kid than I was in high school. So I know that we both appreciate it, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But he might have a little more color for you.
Yeah, you've been great. It's been awesome, and thanks for doing it. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. Let me know when it comes out, and
for sure I will.
Have fun up there.
Yeah, you too.
We're getting an epic winter, huh?
This is it. People are talking about 99 again, saying like this is our 99. This is our second 99. It's amazing. Yeah, I'm sitting in Vancouver right now. There's snow all over the ground. There's been snow here for a month, which has never happened.
That's what I heard.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, that's like unprecedented. So
I
enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm 30 plus days deep right now, and I'm just like sitting here so stoked. Yeah, definitely.
Right on.
Well, thanks
All right,
again
well, thanks,
for talking.
Eric.
Yeah, great talking to you,
great
man.
chat.
Keep doing what you're doing. It's really inspiring.
You got it. You too.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Awesome. See you.
Bye.
FNRad shoutouts this week to my buddy James Booth. He's my sounding board for the show, and I've never properly thanked him on the show, so this is your props, bro. Thanks, James Booth. Music in this week's episode is by The Automation from Nelson. Go listen to The Automation on SoundCloud. They're rad. And keep an eye on your feed for future bonus episodes. I'm going to try and get a bunch out this summer. All right. Bye, guys.